Welcome, everyone. Welcome. We're waiting for a few more people to join, but thank you for coming. And if you're already joining our Zoom room, can you please share in the chat box where you're calling in from? We always love to see who's coming in from different places around the world. Welcome, everyone. We're going to start in another 2 minutes just to wait for people to join. But in the meantime, if you could share in the chat box where you're calling in from, that would be great. Very excited to see everyone here today. We're going to start in another minute. Just give another minute before we get started. If you're just joining us, please include your location. Where are you calling in? Great to see some familiar faces. Wonderful. And today our speakers are actually coming in from different locations as well. I think, Arnold, you're in Hong Kong, and Charlene is in Beijing, and Nikhil, are you in Mumbai? Wonderful, yes. Very international group. All right, I think we'll get started and we can wait for a few more people to join. But I'm very excited for today's conversation. So let's start with the agenda and some housekeeping items and launch right into it. So thank you everyone for joining. My name is Jasmine and I'm the co-founder of PIM. And just some housekeeping reminders before we start. Please share your location in the chat box. We'd love to hear where you're dialing in. And if you have any questions during this conversation, please share them in chat. Our video is recorded during the speaker sharing piece. And if you have questions, at the end, we'll have time for you to turn on your camera and ask the question. Or if you prefer, you can also send it in the chat and we'll collect the questions. Yeah, stay till the end. We always have great announcements at the end. So yes, these are our housekeeping items, and we can move to the next slide. Just very quickly, this is PIM's 10th anniversary. A lot of you are familiar with PIM already, but just as a brief reminder and overview, PIM stands for Purpose in Motion, and it's a social enterprise that empowers young people with the education, resources, networks to become mission-driven leaders and effective change makers. We started out in China, but a lot of our programs now are global, and we work with young people to create change in their own communities through social entrepreneurship, leveraging technology and design thinking to solve problems within their communities. And next slide, please. Yeah, so far we have, in 10 years, we have worked with 13,000 aspiring young leaders who participate in over 50 programs, and with students and participants from over 110 countries. And we've also, a key part of our model is also trying to fund the initiatives that young people start. So we've mobilized over $850,000 US to support student or youth-led organizations and startups. Okay. And I think we skipped a bit. Maybe we could go back to the speaker bio. Yes. Um, Great. And yes, about our anniversary, this is our 10 year. And we actually have a series of monthly events. And each event covers a different topic around a changemaker's journey and social impact toolkits. So if you are interested, you can follow us on our website and stay tuned on our newsletter for our events. And if you have particular stories or topics you're interested in, we're always open to feedback. So feel free to share that with us as well. Great. And without further ado, I just wanted to introduce our speakers today. We have three very wonderful change makers whose stories have always inspired me. I've kind of followed their journey throughout, and they've had ups and downs and lots of different hard decisions that they've made and choices that they made to pursue impact in their career. And I'm really excited for you to hear their stories. So first off, I'd like to introduce Charlene Ren. She is based in Beijing, and she's a social entrepreneur and longtime environmental advocate. And she founded a nonprofit called My H2O, which is an organization that connects resources for clean water solutions in rural areas in need in China. And currently, she also has been working in management consulting. And one of the fun facts that she, for her is that she actually swam in the cold waters in Antarctica. And also another aspect is that she is very competitive in exit room games. I don't know if you guys play exit room games in your country, but she was so competitive that she, I think, bumped at, she actually split her head open playing those games, but she didn't realize it because she just really wanted to win. And only when she finished the game did she realize her head was bleeding and she had to get stitches. So that was the last time I saw her, was her getting stitches. But yes, welcome, Charlene, and really excited to have you here. And our second speaker is Arnold. Is Arnold Chan. Arnold is based in Hong Kong. And I met Arnold, I think, in one of the Hong Kong Federation of Youth Groups gatherings of young change makers. I'm also from Hong Kong, so it's always great to meet a fellow Hong Konger. And Arnold had started Teach for Hong Kong, which is a Hong Kong branch of the broader Teach for America, Teach for All group. And it aims to, it's an educational nonprofit that recruits and trains graduates to teach in underserved schools in Hong Kong. And he also wears multiple hats. Currently, he's also working in a global fintech unicorn. And so very curious to hear more about that transition as well. And fun fact is that he actually started Teach for Hong Kong in a kind of a whim in a very short period of time during his gap year, like right between flights. And so it's curious to hear more about how that decision came about and then what kind of led you to doing that. And the final, last but not least, I'd like to introduce Nikhil, who's a wonderful storyteller, probably the best storyteller I've met, someone who is really passionate about using storytelling, film, to kind of what he calls make important things interesting. And he's based in India, and his founder and chief of Yuva, which is India's first Gen Z youth media. And he also hosts a talk show where he interviews celebrities. And so very curious to hear more about that too. And for Nikhil, if you ever want movie or TV show recommendations, he has the longest and most comprehensive database of shows that he watches and rates. And so, yes, like all of us, we're part of we met through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Goalkeepers Board. And like everyone often asks Nikhil for a show recommendation. He always has the best ones for every occasion and every situation you want to be in. Great. So I think those are our speakers. And for today, our topic is about navigating change in a purpose-driven career and talking about our how we plan our career, how we don't plan our career, and sometimes things happen. But what I really want to learn from the speakers is hear more about their stories and have an authentic sharing about how we kind of make these decisions and how to get to where we are. And so I would like to start by just posing a very general question about defining a career path. Because career means different things to different people, especially in today's fast-changing world. Steve Jobs had put it, the only way to do great work is to love what you do. So reflecting on this, I'm curious, like, what each speaker, like, what was your imagined career path? What did that look like when you were younger, and how did that vision evolve, and what led to where you are now doing the impactful work that you have that affects so many people? So maybe we can start with Nikhil.
Okay. Wasn't expecting to be the first one. Thank you so much for having me, Jasmine, and thank you for such a kind introduction, and for publicizing my list of database of movies and TV shows. Most proud about that, I think, among all the work that I do. I think, I'm a so the cliche is that if you are a boy born in India, your career path is typically either engineering or medical or law. And I think, if I'm not wrong, it's also a cliche that extends to most of South Asia and Asia. Most of so even though when I was young, I was very fond of writing. In fact, I started writing when I was 14. I started getting published in newspapers and magazines in Bahrain, where I grew up. From that age, by the time I was 17, 18, I'd interviewed Michael Schumacher. By the time I was 21, I'd interviewed one of India's biggest, in fact, global superstar, Shah Rukh Khan. And yet, when I would tell my mother that I want to pursue writing, she would explain to me very kindly that I cannot pursue that because that is only a hobby. And the reason for that was because apparently I was intelligent. And her rationalization was, intelligent people don't go for arts. Intelligent people make money. And I was like, okay, clearly that is, you think that I can never make money in arts. Fair enough. So I was pushed into engineering. So my childhood goals, I suppose, in many ways were the direction of every average young Indian boy. That I assumed that I would do engineering, then I would do MBA, then I'd get into a corporate job, I'd get a certain amount of money, a certain designation, a certain kind of home. Uh, Unfortunately or fortunately, by the time I was in fourth year of college, I realized that this is not something that I want to spend my life doing. I think you realize that within the first 6 months of engineering college, if you're not good at it, you realize it immediately. So I spent a lot of my time during my campus years in pursuing every extracurricular activity that I could make my name in, so that I could negotiate with my parents to allow me to pursue a career that was not in technology. Eventually, they agreed. Took me many, many years. But yeah, I started as a reporter in a newspaper in India. Then I was in MTV India. Then I was in a movie studio in India. And today I have my own company, and we work on the intersection of entertainment and impact work. So yeah, the journey is very different. And I suppose, unfortunately, if you speak to, the funniest thing I can tell you about this is, you speak to, I think, 4 out of every 5 people in the entertainment industry in India, and you ask them what is their background. If they happen to be men, they'd say engineering. Like, literally, it's a cliche, but it's a cliche that actually exists for a reason.
Thank you, Nikhil. Yeah, I didn't know you studied engineering, but you've always been such a great storyteller and advocate. So I'm really glad you end up pursuing what you're pursuing. Charlene, would you like to go next and share about your childhood dreams?
Yeah, sure. I think I can do a quick share. I think there's one part I resonate with Nikhil is that I think our upbringing was more or less more conventional. Yeah, I think when we grow up, I think the options was more or less like somewhere along the lines of like a scientist or something like that, right? Like that's what the parents want you to be, or just someone who sits at the desk and like types and just does the more traditional work. So honestly, I don't think I had a lot of imagination of what I actually wanted to grow up to be. But I've always kind of had the feeling that my dreams were sometimes very intuition or emotional driven. Like I remember when I was in second grade when I learned that, oh, like people would die of illness eventually, and I want my parents to live as long as possible. So I'm like, oh, I should be someone who invents a medicine that only makes my parents live for eternity. Like that was my dream for that time. So a lot of it is really just driven by what in that moment you really felt like doing. So I kind of knew I had that intuition in me. But when you put it down onto paper, like as I grow older, I just felt like it was probably going to be more or less traditional. And so that's also why when I started to get interested in the nonprofit work, I remember that the first time was when I was in high school and joined Roots and Shoes, which was a high school club that we had, and really learn about sustainability, learn about the environment, learn about how you kind of get this close encounter with nature and understand the meaning beyond just having good grades and, you know, studying for science and engineering, right? So you understand the meaning behind all that. So I know that was a passion that I had, but I didn't really think nonprofit was going to be a career. Because for me, like similarly, like I think it was just so ingrained in your mindset that this is like a side thing. This is extracurricular that you do, right? This is something that you can do for fun. So that's also what I had in mind. And it wasn't until I think maybe grad school that when I started to really do my H2O, and my grad school had a lot of support for people who wanted to, you know, work on your own initiatives, start your own kind of enterprise. There's a lot of competitions going on, and everyone had kind of some side business ongoing. And I saw all the possibilities of people that are actually starting their own things and running with it. And I realized that, wow, that's actually possible, right? There are actually people who want to pursue nonprofits as a career. And of course, like none of my family approved of that. And I was also hesitant about whether or not to do that. But as someone who, again, follows intuition, like to me, that moment, I'm like, yeah, this is something I'm so passionate about. There's so much support for it. There's a lot of momentum. So as just like that second grade girl who wanted to invent like medicine, I just felt like, yeah, like I want to save water. Let's do it. And so I just did it. So it was a lot of it was like the spur of the moment thing. It wasn't like a very rationally planned out at that moment. And when looking back, yeah, I could have probably made some more calculated decisions and, you know, less spur of the moment. But I think it was quite interesting. I think it was also that courage that allowed you to take a very unconventional path and allowed me to just jump back in China when I was already like, you know, 6, 7 years in the US and just do it. Otherwise, I feel like if I calculate too much, I would have never done that because I'd be very scared. So that would be my story. Yeah.
Thank you, Charlene. I think you still have a shot at immortality if that's something you want to do. Like it seems to be the trend these days, all these you know, famous founders and CEOs trying to pursue that. Um, great, Arnold. Love to
Sure.
hear more about your story.
I think similar to Charlene and Nikhil, like Asian kids' dream is to ace everything. Like we do not have a dream as a kid, especially in the Asian education system. So I studied at a very local school. I born and raised in Hong Kong, went to like local school education system. My parents are very traditional, like, and everything they taught me is to be good at everything, to ace at every subject, to choose a university degree that everyone goes after, to get the job where everyone looks up to. I think that has kind of shaped my childhood in a way where, like, we do not have a dream as a child. We think about impact. Impact equates to success, which is a very narrow way to define it. And I think I was very lucky that I went to the States for a business school, and I think that changed completely how I define success. And I think Asian education system in particular defines success in a very narrow definition. If you earn enough income, if you're able to kind of get married and buy a flat and buy a nice car before before you turn 30, then you're a successful young adult. But I think at my MBA, like I have like classmates who were like past military, who started nonprofit, who worked in like random places around the world. I think my MBA taught me what success looks like. And success means like you are the one who define your success. You are the one who define your impact. And I think because of that, right, just like Jason mentioned during the opening, I basically decided to start Teach for Hong Kong, an education nonprofit, just 2 weeks before I decided to go back to my second year of business school. And obviously, when I decided to start with that with my co-founder, we didn't have an office, and we're working out of Starbucks. And my parents thought I was like kicked out of school or something. Like starting nonprofit was just an excuse for them because like they thought I didn't make it to second year. But I think for me, like the whole business school education, at the same time, the process of starting Teach for Hong Kong, like actually makes me realize and actually ignites a lot of the things about my past as well. When I talk about like we didn't have a dream as children growing up in Hong Kong and in Asian education system, the fact that I chose education as the starting point of my impact is because I was trying to help my younger self. I was trying to change education so that the future Arnolds can have dreams when they're going through this brutal education system of Hong Kong. And I realized that was my passion, and that was also like how I defined my success during my 20s. So I did teach for Hong Kong for almost 6-7 years. And I think I was very lucky. I got a lot of donations. We raised around 4 or 5 million US dollar, and we helped like a lot of schools in Hong Kong. But to a point, I realized like as you grow older, as you want to kind of do more things, right? Like my definition of success also changed, right? My definition of success, and then I told myself it's okay to change because it's okay for you to like dream bigger and to like kind of be hungry and to learn new things, right? So at a point where I feel like, oh, I'm doing the same thing every year, I'm recruiting the same kind of cohort of teachers every year, and then we're doing the same thing. I realized I was the one who's not learning. I was not challenging myself enough. And so basically I jumped back to a for-profit world. I still sit on the board of Teach for Hong Kong. But to be very honest, like I think that was one of the best decisions I've made in my career, because like jumping back to a for-profit world actually opens up a whole new world for me. This is I haven't been talking about my nonprofit journey for almost probably a year now, versus in my like high days of Teach for Hong Kong, I was talking about my journey almost every week. And now looking back, I realized I was very egotistic. I basically collect all the accolades that I could ever collect as a young social entrepreneur. But was I really learning? Was I really amplifying my impact? Like now I look back, I actually think that leaving my nonprofit and really kind of immersing myself into a completely different world actually helps me quite a bit in terms of rethinking my impact journey and how my new learning can actually still contribute to my nonprofit through my board directorship and how I think about my kind of future career. So it was quite a long and strange journey.
Thank you, Arnold. And one thing I noticed, I guess, across all three of our speaker stories is that how you kind of have to defy more conventional wisdom, or like what your parents or what your own education upbringing taught you, and make the leap into something different. And then also sometimes even when after you started your own organization, trying to reach impact in a different level, like always consider these questions. And there's no real right answer to that. I think part of it is your own intuition and your own values. But I'm also very curious to hear more about if you have any just like top principles or questions you ask yourself when you decide to do these things, take the leap or stay the course with the organization or pivot, right? Like in Arnold's case, I'm also in Charlene, I'm changed to something else. So anyone who wants to share, if you have any principles or guiding questions that can also inform our participants here, to think about their own careers. Oh, Arno, I think you're on. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Maybe I can start.
Yeah.
I think there are two questions that I always ask myself, right? Number one is like, what does the word impact mean to me? Second of all, it's whether I'm learning on the job, right? I think when I hit 30, that was the year I decided I should move on from the nonprofit that I founded. I realized I was very egotistic. I realized I thought I was doing very well. I realized that I was not learning. And for me, impact also means that you could maximize your work to benefit as many people as possible. Back then, I do think Teach for Hong Kong was doing quite okay. We're like expanding, we're almost like doubling every year. And but I felt like I could have learned more, right? I could have contributed more, and my learning has stopped. And because Hong Kong is such a small city, right? And I felt like we're not innovative enough. We're not really creating the real impact. And I kind of hit my own ceiling as well. And I looked at other Hong Kong-based, Hong Kong nonprofit social entrepreneur. I think it's very easy to fall under the trap of like, you're doing this thing every year. You're doing great things. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But do I want to stay the same every year? And do I want to learn more and create more impact? I think that was the question I couldn't answer clearly. And that's why I was taking a huge leap of faith by like, okay, I'm not going to be full-time on this anymore. It was a very controversial decision because donors would hate this, because donors like earmark funding because of the founder. And you have to do a lot of explanation, right? But I do think it was the right decision to decouple my impact and the organization's impact, because no organization should be too founder-centric. And I think those were kind of like the principle in terms of how I define my career. The reason I'm joining a fintech unicorn, nothing different, nothing very relevant to what I was doing in education nonprofit, is because like I felt like this gave me the largest ramp. I remember joining this company. I the first couple of weeks, I always told myself to remind myself that treat yourself like a first year analyst, like a first year graduate. Try, everyone is senior than you, more senior than you. Try to learn from everyone. I think that day one mentality, like kind of like dropping all my founders hat, dropping all my kind of accolades as a social entrepreneur, and kind of rewriting my own career kind of chapter, I think was very humbling and actually grounded me a lot.
Thank you, Arnold. And I really love that idea of like thinking about your own learning and, being humble. And when you've done a lot, but you're starting in a space that's very different. Great. Anyone else?
I can just do, oh, sorry. Did Nico want to? Yeah, I'll do a quick add. Just like I agree with a lot of the principles that Arnold mentioned, especially aiming for the impact. I think two additional ones that I have learned to add to my system as I've grown. Another one is whether or not this is something I'm good at. Right. So because for me, I'm someone whose spike is very clear and whose like downfall, like I don't know if that's a shortcoming, maybe it's also very clear. I am someone who is very difficult for me to sit still to work on like Excels for a long time. Yeah, and I have tried to push myself to do that, but it's very difficult. So sometimes when it comes to the very, research-based or analytic, like very heavy, lots of information at one time, and every day it's different information, like that space, it just takes more time for me to do that. So I've also kind of figured out, oh, if I want to be in certain roles, I have to make sure that whatever I'm good at, like my own spikes are, leveraged to maximize impact. So it's not like leveraging my disadvantages, but it's actually making my, it's allowing my disadvantages to grow, but also leveraging my spikes. So I think that's one of the key principles as well. And that's also one of the reasons why I've also felt like it was my time to leave the nonprofit, because at that point I felt like what the nonprofits needed, it needed someone who can compensate my shortcomings. But personally, because at the nonprofit I was the leader, so it was very hard for me to develop that shortcoming, because there was just no one that's better than me at that. So even though that's my short bar, but then it was already the highest for the organization. So it was very hard for me to leverage on that. And so I have to spend so much time leveraging my short leg that my long leg was not really used effectively. So I felt like that was a place where it didn't allow me or the org to grow, and I wanted to change that. So that was one of the key reasons for considering alternatives, like leaders who might be able to, make up for the shortcomings that I had, and also for me to go into another space where I can develop the short part, but also leverage the spikes better. So that was one of the other criteria. And last one, just like a quick statement, I think after I hit my 30s, well-being, it becomes a top priority as well. Like, is this a healthy environment to be in? It was not when I first graduated. I just felt like, oh, let me just be in there. I can survive. And then I've come to an age where I realized there are some environments where I cannot survive. And I admitted to that, like whether it's the hours or the toxicity. And then I'm just like, no, if that's the environment I'm in, if those are the people I'm working with, I'm going to leave no matter how much impact or how much, like achievement I'm able to achieve there. It's just not for me. So that became a principle, I think, maybe in the last 2 to 3 years. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Charlene. Nikhil, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I actually, when I was leaving my last firm, which is a movie studio, and I was doing it was a pretty good position over there. And I started my own company. For me, one of the key things that I thought of why I wanted to do this was because most companies fail, right? But my intention was that I had a very clear understanding that I wanted to do something that even if it fails, it would still be worth it. There is no other reason to go for something new, something where you take a pivot, where you take a risk, because there are going to be so many hard days when you're doing something which is risky, which is new, which is out of your comfort zone. And on those days in specific, you need to be very clear. You're not doing, it doesn't matter if it succeeds or not, because you're doing it because it just matters that you're doing it. And for me, honestly, historically as well, if you look at my career, my career is marked by how many different places that I've gone. I'm an engineer. I started my career as a news reporter, as an entertainment reporter in a newspaper. Then I went to MTV India, so I was in television. Then I went to a movie studio. I've done digital. I have been on radio. I have hosted a YouTube show. I have been a film critic. I have taught for 7 years at a Mumbai college on the weekends. So for me, in fact, from the very childhood, any time that I was, people used to try to define me and tell me, because that's what people do, right? Like, you are typically your designation. You are the career, when anybody has to introduce you, it is like, okay, here's Jasmine and she runs PIM. It's not about the person Jasmine. It is about the company that Jasmine, is founded. So it really becomes about the work you do. And that's always for me something that I find very limiting. Anytime people decide to kind of hold you down and tell that this is what you do, I'm always like, no, I'm more than this. So I'm always eager to take risks. I'm always eager to show that there are more sides of me, and why should we be put into boxes? I mean, society constantly tries to do that. Society constantly says that, you're too old to do something, you're too young to do something, you're too mature to do something, you're too irresponsible to do something. And then there is no perfect time to do anything, but I feel like it's very unfair that when we are younger, when we're 18, 19, 20, we're almost told at that point of time that decide a stream that would end up being your career, or that would end up being your work. And we try to make those decisions when we're too young to make them. So I would always say that we're never too old to make any other decision. I don't think that we should look at anything that we've been doing, even if we've been doing it for 5, 6, 7 years of our lives, as the be all and end all. We always have the time and the capacity to take a turn in our lives, to take the risk in our lives, because it is one life. And if you don't take those risks, then I don't know. I mean, you're just not exploring those parts of you that you may realize that you enjoy a lot more than any other part.
Thank you, Nikhil. And that really speaks to my heart too, because I think, yes, oftentimes you kind of get boxed in, right? And I think that the other speakers also share about that. But we're much more than, our accolades or our definition as like the founder of this organization or what society kind of views as us. And we can constantly reinvent ourselves. So I kind of want to follow up on that and just like ask a little bit more about your transition, kind of like starting Yuva, and following your passion, and doing something that you think is worth doing, even if you failed. So what was the biggest surprise for you during this transition? And also, given that you work very closely with Gen Z, how does like this generation's unique perspective influence the way you approach your work, and including kind of like the very, your really wonderful award-winning show, Be a Man Yard?
I mean, there's a lot of questions there.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and I'm going to try. I'll try to be as honest as I can. Yuva did not come out of a very a spark or a germ of an idea. It came out of anxiety. I was when I was 30, I was diagnosed with clinical anxiety. As I said, I used to be in India's biggest movie studio at that time. I was in a very good role. In fact, you were asking about fun facts earlier. I should have said that I have made four of the first 10 web shows ever made in India. So when India pivoted to digital web series, I produced four of the first 10 of those. And so I was my career, and I was one of the youngest producers in the country at that point of time. And so my career was doing really well. And yet when I turned 30, I got, I was, yeah, I was diagnosed with clinical anxiety. I realized it took me a lot of therapy, it took me a lot of understanding what is going on with me, because my understanding of mental health at that time was that mental health issues happen to those who failed at something, whose lives are not going well. But my life, for all practical purposes, was going well. And it took me a lot of therapy to recognize that I was actually leading my life according to the markers of gender. That in my head, I always had this idea that if I'm 25 and I've not done this, what is my life worth? If I'm 30, I've not done this, what is my life worth? If I'm 35, if I'm 40, so you always have like a societal checklist, right? You have to earn a certain amount of money, you have to have a certain kind of home, you have to have a certain kind of car, you have to have a certain kind of designation at this point of time, maybe a certain kind of Instagram followers. I don't know, so all of these markers play such a huge role in your head. And when you're following them, and in my case, it was very interesting because I actually hit a lot of those markers. And yet, when and what's sometimes worse than not hitting those markers is when you hit them and you realize what happens when you achieve what you wanted. You realize the only thing ahead is more to achieve. So you realize after finishing a milestone that there are just newer milestones now for you to go. And then you realize my entire life I've been chasing these milestones, but now what is left? There is more to chase. And then you have to step back and realize that, is that all my life is going to be? Is it just going to be chasing markers? It is just going to be chasing milestones. And that's what my anxiety did to me. So my anxiety in many ways became a friend to me because it made me step back a little and recognize I was living my entire story according to what society wanted me to do. But what would my story be if I was not my job, if I was not my work, if I was not my career? But for the longest time, people knew me as, Nikhil Taneja, producer at Yash Raj Films, head of content development, etc., etc. And that was my worth. And I wanted to know if I do nothing for a while. So I took I took a sabbatical from my career for about 6 months. That's also the time that I came to Goalkeepers, and a lot of these things came to, I was teaching at that time. All of these things came together and made me realize that I needed to take some time off, think about who I am outside of the work that I do and outside of the designation I am, and what do I really want to do if I had the chance to start new. And that's when I decided that, I love teaching at that time. I was teaching on the weekends. I taught journalism in a mass media college for undergrads for about 7 years. And I really, really loved that. And my skill set was being a producer, being an entertainment, storyteller. So how do I bring those together? And that's why Yuva was born. It was an opportunity for me to create something that doesn't just talk to young people, but also listen to them. Because the number one thing I recognized after talking to Gen Zs as a teacher was that everyone kind of makes the mistake as a teacher, as an educator, to talk to young people, but not exactly listen to them, to try to teach them, but not exactly learn for them. And in fact, my life changed when I started listening and learning from younger folks, because I realized that their understanding of the world is far sharper than ours. And if we use their passion, if we use their understanding of the world, if we use their advocacy and their energy towards important issues, perhaps we can use our experience and skill sets to try and work with them in creating a better world. So that's where Yuva started, and that's where after 6 to 8 months sabbatical from my career, I started a company, and now it's been 6 years, and fortunately, it's all been going well.
Yeah, wonderful. It is very interesting to I think what you're saying about listening to young people, because I think oftentimes people pay lip service to that, right? They say, oh, young people's the future. But when they actually have their perspectives and things they wanted to share, we're not necessarily giving them opportunities to do that. And so yes, thanks for that insight, Nikhil. Charlene, you took an unconventional path, moving from kind of founding a nonprofit to now stepping into management consulting, two worlds that often seem miles apart. So I'm curious, like, how does consulting fit with the stage of your career right now? How have you leveraged your values and experiences from your nonprofit work as you now work in kind of the corporate space, and have your personal impact goals and visions changed since then?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for the question, Jasmine. I think for me, as I've just like briefly mentioned in the previous question, I think at that stage I was also feeling like I've hit kind of a bottleneck at my nonprofit. There were some personal development or impact visions that were very challenging to achieve with where I was at. Part of it is the nature of the sector, and part of it is also my own capability and resource limitations. So I realized that was there, and I don't think I'm going to very easily overcome that by being staying stagnant and just being where I was. So I realized I wanted to jump out of that to just take another more holistic look at I guess kind of the world in general. So that's when I decided to jump out. But my immediate reaction wasn't necessarily, oh, I definitely want to go to consulting or something, right? I just know I wanted to jump out first. So I actually did the transition and did all of the making sure that the org is very well passed down first before I looked at other alternatives. So once that is settled, I just took some time to really think about what I want. And at that time, I think the consulting options came up, and I felt like, oh, that was an interesting way just for me to get to know a lot of this, a lot of the business approach to solving similar issues. So I went in consulting more or less focused on, the sustainability related sector. So that was a time where ESG was still kind of popular on the rise, although recently since COVID, the economy downturn, it has not been going as well. But at that time, it was still like a hot topic. So I felt like, oh, like I wanted to know, now that the policy is out, what are the corporates doing for it? What are people's strategic approach to this, other than just actually solving it from a nonprofit lens, right? So I wanted to take some time to learn that. And on the other hand, throughout my I think nonprofit years, I've also realized that my structure thinking is not as strong as actually my like execution and implementation part. Yeah, I think I had that in me, but it was just not my intuition. My intuition is always like, okay, now we've had this, what are we going to do? It's always about do. Like there's a new funding project comes, let's do it. How do we make sure it happens? What volunteers do we get, right? So I didn't have as much time to really take a step back to think about the big picture. And sometimes I get lost in a lot of just the day-to-day execution and make sure everything happens. So I wanted to see, oh, now that I know that part is something to be strengthened, maybe being at like this more strategic role can allow me to have that perspective. So with that in mind, I kind of came into this part of the I guess the business this part of the sector to explore this alternative role. And I think it has been an interesting journey since the start, because it did give me very fresh new perspectives, especially when I started to work with nonprofits from the other side, because we do give consulting and pro bono services to nonprofits. And then when I'm on the consulting sides and really thinking about the strategy, the business, and looking at how their views are like focused on, and potentially what limitations they have, it was kind of looking at my former self through a different pair of glasses, right? And then I realized, oh, that was why that time that thing failed, right? That was why I didn't take, if I didn't take enough time to think about the priorities, then you wouldn't have made that happen, right? So it was very refreshing to see that perspective and see exactly what I missed when I was doing my own startup, or when I was in that that phase of my life. So I really loved having that new angle, and that was quite important. And another thing that I recognize is that the nonprofit angle did ground me quite well when I was in the management consulting business, because, management consulting is very competitive. Everyone's like, every day, everyone's like super stressed out. The hours are very long. But I think because of my impact lens to things, I always was still able to keep my mind focused on, why am I here? Right. So there's a lot of people around me, they feel like, oh, I didn't get a good review this cycle. Oh my God, I don't have projects right now. Oh my God, like the company isn't doing as well, or whatever. They're always stressed over this. I am, of course, also stressed by all the anxiety that's happening. But on the other hand, I was able to better take a step back, because I felt like my identity was more solid. I knew what I wanted, and I knew myself as a, impact-driven person, someone who loves to contribute to, the causes that I care about, whether it's the environmental sustainability or just serving the underserved in general, right? So those were always like core values. So I realized that I felt more firm and unshaken by all the external comments and just the review cycles, and then just whether or not I was doing good or not on a particular project. Because for me, the goal was always learning, right? The goal was always seeing things from a different lens and seeing what resource I can take back to the impact sector. So I think on some way, I felt more just unwavered on that path, and I felt more firm and grounded than my past experience, because I actually knew what I was coming for. And I know maybe at some point I'm going to leave, right? Once I felt like I've had enough of that. So it did make me feel more just complete in that way. And I think for future goals in terms of like what the role is of impact, I think after a few years in this space, I think it only made me more confirmed, stronger, that I still care so much about the things that I cared about before, and even more so, right? Because I've met so many people whose values are so against mine, and I've just kind of realized that, oh yeah, they're good resource to leverage, but I could never work with people like that. I could never work with people who just feels like, oh, everyone should just be one person. We should eliminate diversity so that we can be more efficient. And that's often the words that I hear, and even the strategies that we propose. And I realized that's just so everything against what my values were. So personally, I know what I'm in the sector for. And right now I'm just on the look for whatever new opportunities that come out, and I'm just gonna take at that and go on to the next journey. So yeah, so I guess I'm at that stage where definitely still looking for my path, my most effective path back to impact, whether it's in this company or somewhere else. But I think it only made me confirm that this is the path that I want to go. And yeah, I'll be back sooner or later. So that's that.
Thank you, Charlene. And I love how you say that, like knowing who you are, like what you care about, is very grounding against like all the kind of external anxieties and things like the craziness that can often happen. Arnold, your career spans from investment banking at Goldman to founding Teach for Hong Kong, and then now leading a fintech unicorn. So I would love to hear more about what you think are the core skills that you have found essential across these diverse roles, and what is your biggest lesson or challenge at each stage of your journey?
Sure. Jasmine, you quoted Steve Jobs at the kind of start of the session. I actually want to really quote Steve Jobs as well. Like I think one of the quote from his book is that you can never connect the dots looking forward, but you can only connect the dots looking backward. So that actually really happens like in my story. Like when I first introduced myself just now, right? I was telling everyone I was quite a kind of a nerdy student back then. I was like a grade A student in a Hong Kong education system. So I was very good at maths. I always thought I would be in a job that's very technical, that's very analytical, because I was very good at maths, very good at like scientific related subjects. But it just turns out my first job at Goldman, I was doing sales at an investment bank. And I remember I hated it. And I actually asked my first manager, why would you hire me as a sales? I remember the first task that I was given was to get name cards of potential clients. I was thrown into a conference. And then my boss asked me to kind of get 20 name cards within the next 2 hours. And I was so nervous that I actually needed to like hide in the mail's room, the mail's toilet, and basically I didn't come out for like an hour or so because I don't want to stand there and then look stupid in front of like all these like people who are like wearing like very like fancy suits, and I was just a kid trying to like get their name cards. So I hated sales, but I did sales for 3 years, and actually the more I did it, the more I learned. And then going into my nonprofit world, right? It was the sales experience that I hated during my first couple of years at Goldman Sachs that made me a really, really good fundraiser, because working with donors is just like selling, right? You need to know when they're making a decision, who to influence in the foundation, what do they care about, how do you basically kind of like suss it out whether this is their appetite or not, right? There's actually a lot of sales skills. So like while I hated doing sales in the first 3 years, actually, because of that sales training, it made me a really, really good fundraiser. And I learned that during my founder years at Teach for Hong Kong, everything is a sales. Basically, you need to sell your vision. You need to sell your vision to your employees. You need to sell your vision to your donors. You need to sell your vision to your partners, right? So basically, the skills that I used to hate a lot actually helped me a lot. Fast forward to the phase now, right? After leaving Teach for Hong Kong, after I hit 30, I was like, okay, I just talked about I needed a new journey. I needed something new, right? I needed to kind of enhance my own learning as well, because I felt like I was not learning. So I actually left Teach for Hong Kong full time before securing anything. Just like Charlene, I was trying to kind of look for a gap, or trying to kind of like look for like a refresh. And then I actually did that for like 3-4 months, and I actually started recruiting, right? Because I didn't know what I'll be doing. So I actually send like CVs to people. And then I remember the headhunters are actually telling me, all the headhunters are telling me, all the recruiters are telling me, your nonprofit experience actually quite irrelevant. So don't ever think of getting like a for-profit job using a nonprofit experience. Why don't you start off as an MBA associate over again, which would set me back my career for like 5-6 years, which is fine, right? But like luckily I landed into a job in my current company where my manager was actually quite insightful, and he was like, okay, you did something that's interesting. Startup is just like that. You need to do something that is interesting, and you need to like constantly kind of problem solving. So while my skill set was not being recognized by the mainstream recruiters, the fact that I know how to fundraise, the fact that I know how to sell my vision to my employees, the fact that I know how to like problem solve, and you know, like as nonprofit, you will face a lot of random problems, like, and the fact that you're managing a team and leading a team from scratch is actually very, very transferable. And I'm pretty proud to say, like, I think 3-4 years into my current role, right? I do think my Teach for Hong Kong experience, my social entrepreneurship experience, really makes me a much, much better leader than any other leaders in my company, because I knew about how to like kind of be empathetic, how to lead people with vision, and how to really motivate people. So like looking back on my journeys, right? I think ultimately my goal, or my principle to like in terms of work, into a career, is to be good at what you're doing, is to try to do your best and try to be passionate at what you're doing. Because while you're passionate about doing something, while you're putting your heart behind something, you naturally pick up some skills that will be useful down the road. It might not sound relevant, it might not sound useful now, but down the road, just like my journey, it has proven time and time again, even though I hate doing something, I try to be good at it, and turns out it's actually very, very useful down the road.
Thank you, Arnold. Yeah, I definitely empathize with like some of what you're saying in terms of like being a founder is very much like being in sales, constantly selling your vision. And really glad to see how that transition has worked out for you. So many people in our audience wrestle with that decision to like think about whether they want to start their own organization or if they want to drive change within the current or existing role. And I'm curious for our speakers, like how would you approach this decision? And if you were to start a new organization today, if there's any resources you would recommend? And I realize this is quite a broad question, but just like your top tip around making those decisions.
So I can go first. I can quickly go. I already spoke about the fact that, just do something that don't do this only because you're going to, you can make money out of it. Don't do this only because you are going to, in your head, change the world. Do this because you find it meaningful. Do this because you care about it. Because on the days that it gets bad, and there'll be many, many, many such days when it gets bad, when your mental health will be all over the place, where you'd just be questioning and you'd just be like, why did I do this? What was I thinking? Especially on those days, you need to know that it's not that you're doing it only for a money or for some sort of impact. You're doing this because you genuinely care about it. That if you did not do this, you would always look back and regret that why did I not try that? So it's for on those terrible, terrible days that you will inevitably have. You need to have that hope that carries you through. You need to have that purpose, that reason very clear in front of you. So you should know your why. That's the most important first thing. The second thing that, especially after now having run a company for 6 years, for me has been find people who are both talented, but also people that again, while the work you can care about, also people you can care about. People who are good, people who are decent, people who make you want to come to work. Because I mean, there's always these statistics you realize, right? That you spend about 60 to 70% of your adult time with your colleagues and not with your family. You spend far less time with your partner, far less time with your parents, far less time with people you love than you do with your colleagues who you see in day and day out. And if you are in a position of leadership, it is so important that you find people who you like being with. Because again, when it gets tough, you need to have people that you can I mean, enjoy and celebrate the win with, but who can also, when it's a bad day, you can also have you can kick back and rest it out with. That you can also just look back and say it's okay. You can, misery loves company. And when you're miserable, there's nothing better than having somebody who doesn't push you down when you're low, who is there with you in that bad time. And so I think this, I cannot say how important it is to, maybe you don't hire friends, but find people who you could be friends with, to be with you in the journey of your company. So these are the two things that I always, I think I hold most strongly. Work on something you care about, and work with people that you care about as well.
Thank you, Nikhil. Charlene, anything to add?
Yeah, I think like my perspective is more on how do we make the decision, 'cause first of all, I really agree with Nicole. Like, first of all, it has to be something you're passionate about, right? Because otherwise, when you wake up in the morning, you don't want to wake up. If it's not something you care enough about, then you'll just lie in the bed and just like not want to do it anymore, right? So it has to be something that even when in your worst moments, you still want to work on it. But how to approach it, like whether it's within an existing organization, kind of an internal startup, right? Like not like a separate startup. I think that's a quite an important decision. From my experience, honestly, like right now, maybe I'm affected by just how bad the economy is at the moment. I think if there is a platform that allows for you to independently do a lot of the things you care about. And that platform can kind of provide you with a safety net and also allows to channel resources very effectively to that initiative. I think it's actually worth considering maybe staying on that platform would be a good idea, because I have observed like some folks who wanted to do their own thing, and instead of coming out and doing their separate organization, they maybe started a separate project within a foundation, right? And then leverage the resource of that foundation to grow it up to a certain point where they realize, oh, this can actually be independent now, right? So you have that incubation phase where you kind of leverage the existing resources of that platform, of that system, to nurture it up to a point, right? Instead of just having to do something completely from zero, or just only your own resources and in your own influence. So yeah, I think for my H2O specifically, we also had a little bit of that, because we were part of a project within a larger organization for maybe about 2-3 years before we decided to become more independent and do our own things, because our mission are no longer aligned. But now looking back, if we had the opportunity, I would have, I felt like if we stayed within a foundation that long enough time, was able to leverage some of the resources from them, or leverage a lot of the experience from them, maybe at the initial stage, we would have been able to become more structured, grow quicker, and just make decisions better, because we're learning how to do that instead of purely just learning from the sole founder. So that is definitely an option to consider, but only with the premise, like precondition that that organization or that space allows you the freedom and doesn't say that, oh, you have to be this way or follow these directions or work with these people if you're on our platform. If it's that way, it might like twist your mission to begin with. So that's also something to look out for if you're thinking of starting it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, just to add on, right, I do think timing is everything. I think I was very lucky to have met my co-founders back then. Was very lucky, it was during business school, so I had the luxury of like quitting school and starting it. So timing is everything. I don't agree that everyone needs to be a founder. I do think everyone needs to be an innovator. But how do you innovate? How do you define your own success really depends on, I think, timing. And I think what you have and what you want to do.
Thank you. Yeah, no, those are all great suggestions. I also just want to remind the audience, if you have questions, feel free to drop it in chat. We'll have a little time at the end to ask questions. In the meantime, I also really want to hear more about our identities. Because I think, Nikhil, you were just saying that you don't want to be put in a box, right? And our careers can change, our identities can shift as well. So I'm just curious how you guys see the role of your identity, and how do you navigate that, the balance between holding on to a core identity if you have one, and embracing the changes that come with new challenges and new opportunities. Charlene, would you like to go?
Yeah. I think if I look back on it, I remember there was a exercise that I did, I think during one of the leadership events, is that we had a lot of cards with a lot of different values, and then you rank them on the order of like which is your top value, right? So I do remember part of, like, I think when I look back, I think some of that value still resonated a lot with me. Like, for example, I remember part of it was healing, a lot of it was connection, right? So these are some of the terminologies that I think throughout, whether it's in the nonprofit space or in the corporate space, that have stayed with me. And I realized that these are the core part of me that I can only thrive on those. For example, if I'm in a role where I'm no longer able to build a lot of connections or influence like-minded people to create impact collectively, then I feel very drained. I feel like I'm no longer myself, I'm secluded, and I feel very alone, right? Because I've had those experience of those types of projects before. So I do think, especially as you do more and more work, that core identity actually becomes clearer and clearer to you. Like maybe at the first it's like one word or like a fuzzy shape. And then as you do more of these exercise, do more of these work, you kind of it's actually through that process you sharpen the understanding of yourself and really understand, like kind of get an idea of what you are and are not. But like so that's like involvement of the core identity, right? And there's also like surrounding, I would say maybe not necessarily like identity, like maybe surrounding just capabilities or surrounding supporting values, like that can definitely evolve and change with time. Like maybe at the beginning I'm someone who cannot talk with certain types of people, right? I don't know how to leverage these types of resources. I'm just a shy person, right? And then later, as I learn more things and I'm able to take a breakthrough on that end, and then I become someone who can influence more people, right? So there are also I think these surrounding values are some things you can break through as you learn more skill. So I would say, yeah, there is a core part where it becomes clearer and it's like central to who you are. And then there's all these like surrounding things that would grow as you learn, and it's worth breaking through and just leveraging them as you navigate through your career. Yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add? Arnold?
Yeah, I think for me, I think always channel your inner mission in whatever things that you do. And like I said, right, I think when I started Teach for Hong Kong, my mission has always been like educating the future of my hometown, Hong Kong, and I'm always very passionate about that. Um, now that I'm wearing a very different kind of hat, I'm like working in a company. I grew my like Hong Kong team from like just 0 people to now like 40, 50 people. Like, but during my hiring, my training, my grooming kind of people, like kind of the process, I always still try to channel my inner mission of like being an educator, try to like use all my teaching from my Teach for Hong Kong days to like, how do I kind of nurture talents? How do I kind of understand their motivation? How do I work with young people? I think for me, sometimes like living out kind of like trying to embody a mission doesn't mean that you have to do great things every day. I think small little steps, how do you talk to people, how do you be a little bit more empathetic in your one-to-ones with your direct reports, in your one-to-ones even with your clients, how do you be empathetic? How do you kind of treat people with respect, treat people with kind of sensitivity? I think these are the things like doing kind things doesn't mean you have to do something really, really great. It means like embodying those values on your kind of day-to-day, on how you interact with people and how you basically do your day-to-day job. I think that's how I basically navigate and how I kind of stay sane, throughout. Because sometimes like things can go really crazy, but like I think during crazy times, no matter how busy you are, like really go back to your inner mission.
Thank you, Arnold. Nikhil, anything to add? And also I'm curious because you talk a lot about toxic masculinity. And so maybe you can share a little bit more about that aspect too.
I feel, I mean, both Charlene and Arnold have already covered a bunch of things that I would have loved to say from a inner mission perspective, as they put it. I think there is so much that we are conditioned by society to be, particularly, as part of gender roles and gender identities, right? A man has to behave a certain way or follow a certain kind of path. Only then will there be a worthiness to being a man. For example, men are pretty. I think a lot of the value that society puts on men comes from their net worth. It always, anytime men get together, it's always about how much are you earning, how much are you earning, etc., etc. And when it comes to women, they have their own challenges. And again, there's so much that women have to fight in terms of even having their voices heard. I think all of these roles, we first need to understand, that what we are conditioned to be. Are we doing the things we are doing because of because we love them, or because that's who we are, because we care about those ideas? Or are we doing those things because society has trained ourselves to be, right? Is our identity our own? And I know these are very existential questions, but I feel like at some point in your life, you're going to be hit with those, right? You will have a period of existential, anxiety, where you would be like, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And it's so important to go back, I think, as Arnel said, to the basics. Uh, who am I as a person? Why do I choose to be who I choose to be? And am I doing these things because this is the story I want to write for myself? Or is this the story that my parents have given me? Everyone over here has said about how our parents tried to put us into these roles when we were born, right? They wanted us to be a certain kind of a person, and or do a certain kind of a job. And it has taken us so much time to kind of find our purpose and our where our heart is and where our heart lies. And some of that has been obviously a lot of conflicts, a lot of fights with our parents perhaps. But even within that, I would say that there are things that we condition ourselves. We start believing stories that sound good to us. We start believing that this is who we are supposed to be because that's what others are doing. And I feel like that's one of the things that our identity cannot be dependent on those. Everybody has their own life path. Everybody has their own life journey. Comparing ourselves with anybody else is absolutely foolish. Everyone also has their own pace. If Arnold today is, I love the fact that, he's taken that call of starting something and then deciding that, no, my heart is not in this. And, or I don't think this is the right time. He's been so honest and vulnerable about that. And it's okay. At any point of time, you can decide to change who you are. You don't have just one identity. I feel like all of us have multiple identities inside of us. And we should be, if we, and again, I feel like, again, Charlene put it so nicely, right? Like, you also have to look at where the economy is. You also have to look at, can you afford to do this? And if you can, I think it's a privilege. If you have enough money to be able to take a risk and find a part of yourself that you have not tried before, to seek out, go for it. Don't get burdened by the ideas of what you're supposed to be because of what your circumstance wants you to be, because of what your community wants you to be, because of what your parents want you to be. And again, where toxic masculinity comes, where what your gender wants you to be. Don't look at your worth. Your self-worth cannot be determined from your net worth. Your self-worth can only come with the things that you love doing, the things that you're passionate about, and the things that make you get up from the bed in the morning and make you feel like, what, I'm so happy that I'm doing it. That's, I think, true privilege.
Thank you. And I agree in terms of like, there are definitely a lot of stereotypes and and things, gender stereotypes that we often face. And also a lot of criticism that we can get when we, step out of these stereotypes. But lots of opportunities to grow too. So yeah, so just curious in terms of kind of when you guys are working in your own organization or now currently in your own in various stages of your career, oftentimes these changes or these challenges to traditional stereotypes can invite criticism. And so have you faced significant pushback or challenges in the past about these transitions, and how do you kind of handle those?
I think the biggest pushback is with parents only.
Parents, yeah.
I think mostly it is parents who are at no point in your life are they completely comfortable with the choices that you're making. Or if it sometimes it could be family, sometimes it's actually your loved ones who are always looking out for you, I suppose, in some way, that they are always double checking that are you sure. And I feel like there is some point to it. And I feel like we should not get into anything new without actually knowing what we are doing, right? I feel like after a certain point in your life, when you're young and you have the space and time to experiment, I think then, of course, make use of that. There is, you'll always be able to jump between things. If something doesn't work out, there's always more time for you to do something else. But if you cross a certain age in your life, I think you should be a little bit more planned and a little bit more strategic about how you're making your decisions, right? Don't get into something just because you care about it, but make sure that that caring is backed up by a plan also. I would not have gotten into, I did care very passionately about, wanting to work with young people. That was my number one, thing that I've also said repeatedly. But the number two thing for me was that I created a company that used my skill set very well. There is this beautiful word called ikigai, right? Like there is, what do you love doing, what can you what is it that your skill set allows you to do, and third, what can you also make money off, right? Because money is important. It's not something that we should, especially after a certain point in life, we should not and cannot ignore it. So how do you bring these three things together? What you love, what is your skill set, and what will make you money? And it's not easy to always find that, but if you get through it with some sort of a plan, I don't think it's also very difficult. I would also advise that in the times of social media, in the times of the internet, where there's so many freelancing opportunities, so many opportunities of making money on the side through these ideas of side hustle. If you're looking at changing field, if you're looking at doing something new or different, I also think that you spoke about, if there is, if somebody is stopping you or somebody is giving you some critical feedback, look at what others have done. Others have already made those mistakes. Look at that, and if at all you still feel that you don't have enough knowledge about it, give something part-time a shot on the side. So try and put your hands into it. Try and see, can I actually do it? Is this actually something that I am capable of? Because sometimes you can be super passionate and you can have an idea, but you may not be good at it. And that is something you don't want to find out at a certain age of your life after you've taken a big risk. So have some understanding, have that confidence, and then of course be driven by your care and your passion.
Great. Thank you, Nikhil. And Charlene, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I think in addition to, the external stereotypes, sometimes I feel like there's also internal boundaries that we set within ourselves, right? Like, maybe I am just this type of person, right? Like I have friends who said, oh, I can never imagine myself doing a startup. I can never imagine myself doing something nonprofit because that sounds like it's just so different from what I do. And I'm just concerned whether or not, like, I can achieve anything or what I would be perceived by others. So then we kind of box ourselves into what we are now. Like, I'm just a traditional person. I'm just someone who lives life like this, right? So often when I encounter these people in life, I would like to invite them. I often try to, invite them to, for example, sessions like this, or just the opportunity to meet more people, like people like, Arno and Nikhil here. And then they realize that, wait, these people they had path like me, but they were able to somehow jump out of that stereotype and become something else. How did they were able to shift that and change that? And it kind of breaks their understanding of what's possible, because sometimes they don't even see that as possible. They don't think of it as, oh, I'm like pressured by external condition to do this. They just made that condition onto themselves and completely accepted that as all there is to their life until they're exposed to other things, right? So yeah, so that's kind of my hope for, like, whether it's people here or beyond, right? So whenever you have the chance, spread that message and just get more people to see all the possibilities and all the alternative routes that people have taken. Especially now that I'm in like a corporate world, sometimes I tell people, like, someone just left this world and went to the rural communities to build like a whole like a mini hotel there and start to plant their own gardens. And they're like, what the hell? Like, is that even possible? I can't imagine doing that. Are they crazy? Like, they just can't imagine that happening until you send them these, like, notes and stories. And then they realize that, yeah, interesting, right? So I have come across more and more people who doesn't really think, they felt like they've always made decisions by themselves, right? They felt like, I've taken every step because I know what I want. But then they realize then it's kind of actually the limiting external conditions or awareness of other issues that didn't really allow them to fully be free in their choices until they see more and experience more. So yeah, that's also a very important aspect of it.
Thank you. Yes, definitely external challenges, but also internal, kind of the internal mindset and framework around it.
Cool. Maybe I'll share mine. I think during my journey as the founder of Teach for Hong Kong, I did face a lot of criticism. So I think mostly from my board of directors and board of advisors. I started teaching Hong Kong at the age of 25, right? And I knew like education is a very kind of old-fashioned kind of industry. So I built a very senior board of directors. I remember I had like around 10 board of directors that are like CEO level, everyone basically twice my age. And I remember having this quarterly board meeting. I was like a uni student presenting my final year project to like a bunch of professors. And I think slowly as I kind of became more aggressive in terms of expanding the organization, I got a lot of negative feedback in terms of the board, like saying that, oh, you shouldn't be that ambitious, you shouldn't be doing that, right? And back then I didn't listen to any of that. I was very defiant. I like as a young social entrepreneur, because you had success, it's very easy to think that you're doing the right thing. You felt very self-righteous, and basically, I think I ignore a lot of the advices, and I just like like kind of move ahead and like do what I believe is right for the organization and the mission. Looking back, if I had taken more of their advice, maybe I would have commit less mistake during the journey of Teach for Hong Kong. And I do think, especially for young social entrepreneurs, right? Young people who are trying to make an impact. Now that I'm kind of mid-age, looking back, I felt like I was too self-righteous. If I had the empathy and I have the humility to listen more in these advices, I might not need to follow them, but if I could be more reflective on those advices, it would have made me a much better social entrepreneur. So now I look back, I do think criticisms are always the best thing you could ever get as an entrepreneur, because you don't have a boss, you don't have a manager. It's very easy to be immersed in a field that you're doing the right thing, you're doing a good thing for society, everything is right, you're doing it, you shouldn't be listening to everyone. Like it's very easy to enter that kind of mind frame. But like now that I age more and those criticisms, now I look back, are the best way for me to grow.
Thank you, Arnold. And then I see some questions from the audience. So Judy has a question. Judy, I don't know if you're able to share the question yourself. Otherwise, I can read it out for you. Maybe I'll go ahead and read it.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Go ahead, Judy. Okay.
Thank you. So my question is actually basically about wondering when to make the decision to leave, to make this transition. Like if I already realize that I'm not that interested in my current job or this industry or this profession, would it better to do it right now as for the time efficiency, or as Arnold says that it's better to do it better to at least learn something from this experience. So that's just my question. Thanks.
I can take that since my name was named. I do think ultimately I think it would be irresponsible for any of us to say, okay, you should leave now or you should stay. I think at the end of the day, it's really what your own passion is, right? Like, and what your mind frame is like. Like if you think you're ready, you shouldn't be asking this question. But if you think that you need more time, take the time, talk to more people. I think ultimately, at least from my experiences, ultimately it really comes down to a split-second decision, and you knew the time is right when you wanted to make, you would know the timing is right when you want to make that decision. So for me, it's very impulse driven. Not everyone is like that, and I'm not saying that this is the right thing to do or anything. Everyone should have their own kind of time frame and mental model in determining their career.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah, and I also want to add, like, I know, like, I don't know if you're in China or not. Right now, the job market is like really shitty. So it's like more difficult to leave right now compared to any other time, I would say. So I understand that's like also a practical concern. So I think if you have something stable now, it'll be good to, take your time to explore, right? See what options are out there. And maybe if your current job allows, you can also start something, on the side and just try it out and test run it. And then after you get a hang of it, really knowing like, oh, this is actually quite clear what I'm going to do next, and the opportunity just jumps at you, then that's also quite clear, right? But of course, if your current job is like killing you, it's not allowing you the space to think and not really meeting a lot of your own personal goals, and not giving you the time to think about your next steps, then I would say that's not a very good place to be in. So that might warrant some thoughts about whether or not to take a step back, because it's basically not allowing you the space to help you think about the next step that is potentially more meaningful to you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Great. I'm aware of time, so I just wanted to kind of end with one last question to our speakers, and it's a personal question around mental health and well-being. In the pursuit of impact and growth and learning, sometimes it's easy to forget self-care. So just I'm curious if you could share what practices do you have in place to maintain your mental health, maybe your top practice or tip you have for our audience. Maybe we can start with Nikhil.
I'm the person who speaks most about mental health publicly, and I'm the worst when it comes to my own mental health. I I feel like I'm always more cognizant of seeing other people's burnouts, and when seeing other people are in a place where they require a little bit of self-care than my own. It's over a period of time that I have recognized my own signs. I think mental health is such a big spectrum. It takes a lot of time before we are able to recognize what is it that makes us burn out, what is it that makes us anxious, what is it that may trigger like a emotional episode or a depressive episode, etc., etc. Those are symptoms that it take a lot of time and effort, and unfortunately maybe some bad times to really recognize about yourself. I know that the easy way of doing self-care is, let's go for a spa, or, let's have a good day out, and spend a lot. And that's always seen as self-care. Let's go to Amazon, or, I guess, I don't know, Alibaba perhaps, and then just, add things to your cart, and that's great self-care. I feel like we need to, any self-care, true self-care actually is about finding a slow time in every single day that you live, right? It's not about, and this is my own earlier understanding was quite bad. In that sense, I used to always work for my holidays. So I would work crazily for about 3 months, and then I'd be like, okay, I've got that nice 1 week after the end of 3 to 4 months, and I'm going to work towards that. And then I'd burn myself out for 3 months, so that the first 2 3 days of the holiday were just me honestly like trying to recover from the burnout. So I'd probably have like 1 or 2 good days, and then that would also be hectic. So I never really actually rest. And what I've recognized is that you need to find and build time in every single day of your life, doing something that you find mindful and that you find peaceful, and you find that makes you just be a little bit slower, that makes you be a little bit reflective, that makes you be a little bit more thoughtful of your day. So now a lot of people obviously do things like yoga or may do things like exercise. For me, as an example, it is reading a book in the morning. I get up and I try to spend about 30 minutes reading a book. In the night, I try to spend about half an hour going for a walk. And these two things always center me a lot. So I feel like all of us need to find that thing that centers them in and make it a daily practice, versus looking for those either like capitalist excuses of spending and trying to get that as self-care, or finding or keeping that one milestone that I will enjoy myself after I achieve something, or I will enjoy myself after I'm done with the next 3 weeks. Don't do that. Try to build your contentment, your peace, your mindfulness on a daily basis, and make it a practice. And that's, I think, something that has helped me so much, being a little bit more of a centered human being than anything else.
Right.
Thank you, Nikhil. Go ahead, Charlene.
Yeah, I can definitely add to that. Like, I definitely agree. Like I'm someone who's I don't know if everyone knows the MBTI system. I'm a very F person, and my emotion goes like ups and downs. Like I remember there was an app where you can record the scores of your emotion from day to day. I remember I did one like across the same day, and it just goes like this. Like every hour there's like some changes. So sometimes it can get really overwhelming or exhausting. So in addition, like I think grounding is very important. I remember I had like a diary partner for a while, like just someone who has similar needs as me to have something to ground. So we basically write maybe just 1 or 2 sentences each day to each other so that we use that space as a space to ground each other, right? So that's kind of a similar practice to what Nikhil said, whether it's reading a book or writing something, right? Have something that anchors you so that even amongst all your instabilities, you have something there, right? And another practice that for me has been helpful is also building kind of your community. Like basically, like this is like a safety net. Like whether it's people you hang out with, play with, or talk about, like all the shitty stuff at work with. I remember at my job right now, like sometimes things can get really shitty, but we do have these like venting groups, right? So these are people you can trust with each other, and whenever you come across something, you just like say really shitty things in the group, and people vent with each other. And sometimes we just get together and like just talk very like just like talk about all the negative emotions we have, and these are people you trust and feel secure with, and then once you are at least with them, you feel less alone in on some way. So that's also a very important thing. And I think lastly also just allowing yourself to take a step back and stop and heal, because I think when I was doing my nonprofit right after I left, I didn't like immediately say, okay, I have to have a job before I leave the nonprofit. I just said, okay, I'm just gonna leave, and then I'll take some time for myself. And during those times, I was still engaged with the nonprofit, doing some independent work, but I had just honestly I had more time to myself. And so during that time is when I really I started to say, okay, maybe I should buy new clothes, because I rarely do that. I'm just like, I just don't buy stuff, right? So I made the mission to like, okay, I should buy a new piece of clothing every week, because that's just very difficult for me to do. And I felt like I need to do that. And once I'm just like, okay, what should I buy? Then I went online and find out people who have similar like body shapes as me, and then realized that, oh, this is actually how you buy clothes, right? I actually measure like, my waist and like my legs. Like I never measured those before. And then during that process, you really start to learn like the actual self-care. I never took the time to understand like, my needs, or taking the time just to do these efforts for myself. And through that process, through like buying a piece of clothing every week for myself, I honestly felt quite healed and much happier, and also having more clothes to wear. So a lot of that those come together, and it was really a process that I've never had before and didn't allow myself to have. And I think since then, I've actually am able to allow myself to just take care of myself, to indulge in these more like kind of things that you feel like, oh, maybe it's not worth doing, but then you realize it's really worth doing, and it's like makes your life so much better and make you care about yourself more, and also more productive on a daily basis. Yeah.
Since we're at time, I'll keep it short. I think one very important lesson I've learned all the way is always remember there's this other self. Your mission, your job does not define you. It never defines you. There's like the personal side of you, like you hang out with friends, go like be silly and go watch like random stuffs. There's always the side of you that's not defined by your mission, not defined by your social venture, not defined by a job. I think that is very important. And for me, like being like kind of like 100% behind Teach Hong Kong for almost 5 years, leaving that, seeing the world without having the whole Teach Hong Kong founders lens was extremely refreshing, and was extremely humbling and extremely kind of rewarding to myself as well. So I hope that everyone knows that there's this side of you that is like not just about work.
Great. Thank you all. And I know we're out of time, but I really want to say I personally learned a lot from this conversation. So thank you so much, Arnold, Charlene, and Nikhil, for sharing your authentic stories themselves and perspectives with us. We talked a lot about, career decision-making choices, learning and reinventing yourself while staying true to your values and mission. We talked about challenging external conventions and internal boundaries, but also the importance of like being humble and listening to others, young people or elders, and kind of reflecting that attitude. And then finally covering self-care. So I think we covered a lot of ground today. And I just want to say thank you so much for the incredible work that you do. I follow your journeys, and it's really been amazing to kind of see the behind the scenes of the ups and downs and how you made those decisions. Leslie, if you could share we could share with the audience your contact information, and then here, if everyone can just take a quick second to give us some feedback, that would be wonderful. But yes, thank you very much again, everyone, for spending this evening or morning or wherever you are with us, and hope you gained something from it. And a big round of applause again to all our speakers. Yes, and this is everyone's LinkedIn. We can also, feel free to take a screenshot of that. If you have further questions, feel free to reach out, and please do stay tuned. Pim, we have more events coming up. And if you like this event, please give us some feedback in terms of how what else you want to hear and how we can improve. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great day wherever you are.
Thanks, Jasmine. This was really wonderful and really nice listening to you, Charlene and Arnold. It was absolutely amazing. I loved how vulnerable you both were, and I think that's something that I really admire in folks who are doing such great work and still are okay with being honest and vulnerable. So I really had a great time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you as well.
Everyone.
Looking forward to your movie list.
I'm going to send something to Jasmine. She'll forward to you.
So, thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Jasmine. Thanks, Pam.
Bye.